Hi everyone, this is Dina Wasmer from Incite Creative coming at you to discuss getting back to work. It's a topic that we're all talking about right now. Some of us have been back at work, but maybe not physically back in the office. And there are a lot of questions about how to effectively communicate who, what, where, and how to employees, clients, and prospects. So I put together this presentation to help all of the above and many of our friends of the firm to start thinking about three key ingredients to getting back to work that all relate to communication. So here goes. We don't want to let communication slip through the cracks. So I thought I would start out with my own story about my customer journey related to window well covers. As you can see, this is my flower box and my yard about a month ago. And there are metal grates over my window well covers, in theory to help keep leaves and debris and ideally critters out of there. But as you can see, that was not the case. So if you take a good look over here, there was quite the buffet going on with about 6 frogs, or breakfast, lunch, dinner, and 2 desserts for this hungry, unwelcome guest of a garter snake. So I'm an outdoorsy person, and so I have seen snakes before, but do I really want them in my window well, and do I really want this reptilian situation going on so close to the inside of my house? No. So after I promptly evacuated all of the critters, I then went into the house and I sat down at my computer and I promptly ordered some window well covers. But the story of this customer journey and that experience continues when I contacted, after doing some thorough research on what company, based on their reviews, might be a good resource for me. So I did locate a vendor, a provider that I seemed happy with. I made a phone call because I had some questions. And I spoke with a gentleman named Luke, and he was wonderful, very enthusiastic. He helped me identify which type of covers were going to be ideal for my situation and the type of architecture for my home. And he also shared with me the company's value proposition, which is measure twice, cut once, to ensure 100% customer satisfaction. So I could get on board with that. And he also let me know that they would send measurement instructions and that I would be relayed over to his colleague, Heather. And Heather would then help to confirm my measurements and get my order placed. I said, sounds good. I provided my credit card information, and shortly thereafter I did receive an email from Heather, and we had a good laugh about the snake incident and me having to go in there and take measurements. And I submitted those, she thanked me, and my expectation was that my project was moving forward. Well, that was not necessarily the case. As you can see on the screen here, I have redacted some of the company ingredients, but you will see that there were at least 5 emails that I got after I submitted my measurement confirmation saying, hey, Dina, where is your measurement confirmation? We need that in order to proceed. To which I replied, the first couple, I have replied to Heather. She assured me things were moving forward. And of course, it occurred to me that these were likely autoresponders. Well, in my business, I'm very familiar with autoresponders, and we've set those up for many clients over the years. But when someone has been furloughed, as was in this case that we found out, Heather was no longer available, and therefore my project slipped through the cracks. Additionally, apparently no one had been assigned her emails or those from the autoresponders. They weren't being checked. And so my perception of this company quickly went from an A plus from my phone experience to about a C minus and increased frustration due to my online email exchange with this company. So the point here is that when it comes to communication, it really starts internally. So how do we effectively communicate when teams are still dispersed? Or in the case of my window well covers, if members have been furloughed or laid off, or there's been restructuring, all of this impacts the customer journey, their brand experience, and ultimately your reputation. Because of course, people are much more apt to jump online and provide a 1 or 2 star review when they are in venting mode versus going on and providing a 4 or 5 star review when they're super duper happy. Unfortunately, it's just the nature of the beast. But we want to curb that as much as possible and encourage positive reviews to then help increase and improve your reputation online and otherwise. So number 1, avoid a breakdown in communication by starting internally. Have two-way communication, even if they have to be interactive or virtual, be it through all hands meetings, videos, webinars, Slack, team chats. Start with some employee surveys to make sure that you're getting perspective from the internal team members and understanding, obviously, what projects are going on and any questions or concerns that members have, particularly when there is passing of the baton from a person taking the phone orders to customer service to the engineering staff or whatever is most applicable to you and your company. Then you want to use the feedback from that internal experience to facilitate, document, and distribute consistent messaging around outcomes pertaining to new staffing, customer relations, project management, and identify any gaps that may exist related to communication. And you also want to then determine what brand touch points need to be updated and distributed and when. For instance, the autoresponders that I was mentioning, making sure that those have been updated and attended. Because when you have effective communication, it allows your employees to stay informed and really work toward organizational goals and help the company succeed. It also helps avoid angry customers like me and this guy over here, my evacuated snake. So step 2 in this, communication and getting back to work, involves reevaluating your value proposition and brand message. So if we think about what was going on before the pandemic, so March 2020, and then from March 2020 to the present, what target audiences care about or cared about before then may not be of equal importance now, or their priorities have shifted. And every company and every situation is unique, but there are a few examples here. So for instance, before the pandemic, everyone wanted quality product or service. They were brand loyal. They likely wanted to work with someone who is experienced and provided rational thinking. Diversity was important to them. They also worked really hard and were likely looking for some downtime or time to themselves. And there are other factors here. But to jump over to the next column, if we look at once the pandemic was in full swing, and even as we are here currently in early July, not only did people want a quality product, but the priority has shifted to health and safety in terms of employees getting back to work, clients visiting your physical space. Those are priority messages still at this point. How is your messaging and your communication going to shift to address health and safety concerns? Similarly, with brand loyalty, let's take toilet paper, for example, something we can all relate to as a commodity product. Well, I'm a Charmin girl myself, but when I wasn't finding my Charmin on the shelves, I didn't really care what I could get my hands on as long as I didn't have to use toilet or paper towels. So uh, at that point, it was really about product or service access, and brand loyalty took a back seat. And then also due to the most recent events with the protests and Black Lives Matter movement, there's also more heightened awareness around an alignment of core values. So these messages are taking precedence over brand loyalty, and there are brand loyalty shifts happening as well. As far as experience and rational thinking, of course, people still want to work with someone experienced, but their priority has also shifted to trust and empathy. So you'll see some other examples here that I encourage you to spend some time with, but for the sake of this video, we'll move on. So how do we reevaluate your value proposition and brand messaging in light of this new normal? So first off, we want to gather input from your internal team through competitive research and from customer surveys. Now, this may sound very familiar for those who have worked with us and the process that we took at our initial onboarding. Well, whenever there is enough time that has gone by, be it annually, every 18 months, or in a situation like this where the world has changed and deliverables have changed, it's important to reevaluate your value proposition and brand messaging. We really want to take a look at who are we and how do we want to be perceived today and in the forecastable future to be relevant to our customers and clients. So let's look at this closely. Today, as well as the forecastable future. Now that may change for each of you. So some people may say, you know what, I can only forecast out the next 3 months. There's just too many different things going on, too many variables. Others might say, you know what, I've got a good handle on things for the balance of the year. So it really does depend on your own situation, but it's about brand perception. It's also about what do we do, make, or offer today and in the forecastable future that will be relevant to our clients. And what makes us special, unique, or differentiated from the competition, again, today and in the foreseeable future, that will be relevant to our clients. So not just what we want to push out to people, what do we think we care about, but it's more about what pain points are we addressing to of our target audiences, and how can we prove those differentiators. So in the visual example here, this is one of the funeral homes that we represent up in Wilmington, Delaware. Now, there were government mandates that said that funeral services could only include up to 10 people. That is extremely small and extremely difficult for families who are grieving and for loved ones who want to pay their respects. So this client, with our assistance, helped to incorporate new technology to accommodate larger groups. So Facebook live streaming services, as well as videos that kept a touch point with the target audiences about things like paying attention to our physical health, daily prayers, those types of things. And then in terms of really differentiating, the Wilmington office was retrofitted. It was in a bank with a drive-through, and they quickly installed a drive-by viewing window, as you'll see in the upper right-hand corner, to accommodate groups safely from their own car, could drive by with a casket in the window and pay their final respects. Now, some might say that seems a little strange, but it solves a problem. And for families who would otherwise not be able to have this experience and send off and say their goodbyes, it solved the problem, and it was a very welcome addition. It also proved from a marketing standpoint to be a key ingredient from a public relations standpoint and get some attention on the firm. So talk about turning lemons into lemonade when it comes to the pandemic and trying to find opportunities to differentiate and still service clients or consumers in this case. This is one example. And I encourage you to look for other examples about how you in your company or organization can pivot or disrupt or innovate based on the feedback that you've obtained to stay relevant to your clients and prospects. And then thirdly, then communicate that value proposition and brand messaging first internally for your best brand ambassadors, your employees, and throughout the customer journey for your existing and prospective clients as well. So how do you communicate the new you throughout the customer journey? Well, this is me mid-pandemic in March in Key West, Florida. So this was me enjoying a night out with a lovely dinner, but I was also in the back of my mind thinking, should we go home? What are we going to do? I can't believe this is happening. But prior to all of that, a year prior, we started thinking about our trip. And in the most basic terms for our vacation, there were 3 steps to the customer journey. We were dreaming about where we wanted to go and where we wanted to stay. Then we started planning our trip. We wanted something with a pool. We wanted something pet friendly. And then it went to booking. How are we going to get there? Well, even in this most basic example, and if we think about what's going on in the world right now, people aren't real hip on flying. And so when we now look at how, if we were in the hospitality business, one would adjust their customer journey, they would really need to reevaluate these 3 steps. And these are just the basic 3 steps. As you can see here in this next slide, there are several steps to the customer journey. There are pre-purchase stages and there are post-purchase stages. Now, this is one example and a model that we use, and some of you may see that this looks familiar. Your own industry, you may need more stages or fewer stages, but this gives you a good example of how it runs the gamut from first identifying the need, planning, research, evaluating, justifying the purchase. Of course, everyone goes through that. Hey, do I really need it? Do I need it right now? Is it worth the money? Then they are ready to purchase, but then we don't want to drop the ball. Then after the purchase, there's, adoption, retention, expansion, and advocacy. So I would encourage you to really take a look at your customer's new journey, because it is new, and now it may be just slightly adjusted or dramatically adjusted or somewhere in between. And does your journey differ per customer type or persona? And we can get more into personas, but it's demographically, psychographically, geographically, and just really, what's on that type of customer's mind right now, as well as on their heart. So they're asking questions at each stage. They're have emotional and feelings at each one of these stages that are impacting their decisions. And then what are we going to do to respond to those questions and feelings? And then in terms of our response, how will we respond? Is it by phone? Is it by some sort of digital touch point, a brochure, a checklist, a form, a white paper, a blog, a video? What are we going to use that is not just pushing our own agenda, but is really addressing their concerns in light of what's going on in their mind, on their heart, and in the world right now? So if we go back to our vacation rental example, that 3-step process that I showed you is much more complex, even on a good day, meaning pre-pandemic. It's much, much more involved, as you can see here, with lots of boxes, lots of if-then scenarios, if they're not sure, making a decision, where technology fits in, where different internal teams fit into the equation, and these different brand touch points. So again, it would be valuable to take a look at your own customer journey now, or if you haven't done one before, to compare, then start fresh today. So following this same train of thought, as we mentioned before, people are no longer flying, they're having staycations, or they are preparing trips that are more within driving distance. How is that going to impact the dreaming and planning stage? Similarly, back to some previous slides when we talked about the reprioritization of messages, it's still about quality and having a good experience and a fun time, but people are asking more questions about housekeeping and cleaning practices, travel insurance, and refund policies, to name a few. And what if you want to go on a trip and you usually call up your same reservationist, but they're no longer there? Who's going to pick up the ball? And is your data captured in a CRM system where they can pull up your past history and know where you stayed before and what your interests are? Or are you going to have to start from scratch? You're really going to lose some faith in your customer standpoint and your reputation if you drop the ball. Similarly, your website, for instance. In this example, if the property where you stayed before or the one that you're interested in and you spend all this time researching and say, yeah, I want to book that one, and you find out, oops, the website wasn't updated because that property owner pulled out and that property is no longer available in the portfolio, and you haven't been offered up alternative comparable choices. Again, that's going to reflect poorly on you and the company. And then your good old automated messages, like we talked about with Luke and Heather in the window well example. You want to make sure that any outgoing messages are tended to, and if not manual, if they are automated, which is fine, but they need to make sure that they have been updated and reflect your new messaging and the customer journey as it stands right now and in the foreseeable future as well. So lastly, how do we communicate through the new journey? And what brand touch points will we need to use to address the audience's wants, needs, not yours? So in the right-hand side, you can see some visual examples. And the first thing is signage. So for those of you who haven't addressed your social distancing needs, if you have a physical location, now is certainly the time. So there are plexiglass signage to separate and keep folks from having any sort of exchange of fluids or otherwise. We also have floor decals. There are hand sanitizing banner stations, and there are also branded face masks. And there are also banners and flags and signage for storefronts and otherwise. These are a few examples that I encourage you all to make sure that you have in place for your employee awareness, not to overlook them as they come back to work, as well as for your customer experience. In addition to that, there are videos and webinars, podcasts, infographics, cheat sheets, interviews, free trials, and Google My Business updates that should be considered. Now, Google My Business, for those of you working with us now, we are likely maintaining that for you. But for your awareness, that's a bit of one-stop shopping where if your business hours have changed or any key about us types of information, or your location if you're no longer working at your physical space, all of that needs to be reflected within your Google My Business pages. So when people are looking for you, they're getting the most up-to-date information. And then when it comes to prospecting through the customer journey, lead magnets are great ways to help people through that journey and nurture them along the way. So a few examples include checklists, resource guides, ebooks, workbooks, lookbooks, and templates. So listed here are a few examples, both pictorially as well as in the content here. So checklist example, how to maximize your rental revenue might be something that a vacation rental company may include. For a resource guide, a business advisor or exit planner might put together a guide entitled 5 Things to Set Up Before Selling Your Business. In terms of ebooks, we've worked with many of you to create ebooks, sometimes pulled or compiled a compendium of blogs on a similar topic. So a divorce attorney might put together an ebook entitled Everything You Need to Know About Preparing for a Divorce. Or a signage company might say 10 ways signage can improve the health of your organization. Extremely relevant right now. In terms of workbooks, a funeral home client may have, why should you pre-plan your funeral today? Well, in the light of COVID, people are thinking about their mortality more than ever before. For lookbooks, a public speaking coach might put together 5 of the best TED Talks deconstructed, which is a collection of visual samples, usually curated from third parties for inspiration. And then lastly, templates. Everyone loves a good template. So this is something perhaps a financial planner might have come out of 2020 on budget with help from this easy to use budget template. Now, whether it's an Excel sheet or something even more customized, these are examples of lead magnets that you would need to create and determine what's going to be the best fit during the customer journey through those different stages. In the early stages when they don't know you from Adam, as well as they start researching and comparing you to other providers. So think of it as a bit of a give to get, but also always doing it keeping in mind that it's really about what your customer or your target audiences want and need and deem relevant, not what you deem important at that point in time. So I hope that this was important to you and that you can find it useful. And if you have any questions, we're always here for you. This is Dina Wasmer from Incite Creative. Stay safe, and I look forward to talking with you soon.